For anyone who can see the reality of now, the actual reality of now, what's happening, what's been gearing up to happen, what many people that have that ability to see reality have been hoping doesn't happen and trying to prevent from happening, World War III. All of these things, it's really sad for people who are aware of reality, but also of everything, full human beings, mind, body, and spirit human beings. Because we know that now could have been a time of evolving, of elevation, of true illumination, but instead it's just revelations. It's a time period where so many people who are not actually full human beings in tune with mind, body, spirit act like they are, while dismantling the ability to actually change the future and allow us to actually be able to be propelled into evolution and illumination. Their facade of being ascended is exactly what propels everyone into revelations instead of enlightenment. And that's why Revelations was there, to try to warn people of this time. I'm not super well versed, double meaning joke there, on the Bible or any scriptures because I was not raised to be religious, and I also had pretty limited interactions with churches. I went with my grandparents sometimes, and I'm not ashamed to say that I went for the food. That's what I did, so that's me being honest. Usually I tuned out whatever was going on around me because I had my own connection to spirit, and it wasn't really a place that I felt super connected. When I went to Bible camp when I was older, because it gave my parents some time away and I was fine with that, the pastor was like too emotionally aggressive. He wasn't Baptist passionate, he was an angry man. So I just completely tuned him out because, well, it was my vacation from being yelled at. I never really had a Bible. When I was young, I had a white Bible that I very rarely read. I bought a Quran in 2009 when I was 23, and I started to go through it over the past few years by randomly opening a page and reading the passage that I pointed to with my eyes closed, and I did the same thing with the Bible that I bought last year. I don't have any of those books with me because I left my state and my country because of everything that I've been through. But what's really crazy to me is that so many people have so much misinformation about cultures and traditions, and they've been so led astray that it causes fear, which literally causes the major religions to consider them evil to begin with, and it's all misinformation, lack of understanding. So I received messages from Great Spirit Incarnate that I was Great Spirit Incarnate in March of 2020, and that I was here to help elevate everybody and bring us into a time of evolution. And then I had to watch, well, after being crippled, I had to die and live and try to exist and watch this all happen while trying to still prevent all of the major catastrophes that could happen from happening as a woman with no place or status in my country, or no connection to my lineage or culture, because my family was constantly trying to run to keep themselves safe, and we couldn't really practice a lot of our traditions, and I didn't learn about them growing up. So one of the things that I watched today, which inspired me to do this video, is some young men who are talking about skinwalkers in Native American culture and tradition. Shapeshifters, shamans. Now, unless they speak on them as being a completely separate entity from shamans and indigenous peoples, that could be a misunderstanding on my part. But as an indigenous mixed race woman who does connect to spirit and is here for a reason, that information is going to cause fear, conspiracy, it's going to cause misinformation, lack of connection, and cause more people to consider now that practice, misunderstood practice by what they're talking about, as dangerous or evil, which is exactly what causes the downfall of the connection to spirit in that way to begin with. It's things like this. You know, his tradition probably taught him that because they didn't want them going up into those caves, and they probably recognized their spiritual abilities and didn't want them to pick up anything and bring it back home with them, a negative energy and entity, because that is true. They can latch on to people, and if you don't have an understanding of spirit or understand what's going on, it can negatively affect you and those around you and be dangerous because you don't have the facilities to deal with it on your own. It's why when you're in magical circles, oftentimes they will ask no one to be drunk and no one to be under the influence of drugs, because the strongest practitioner is going to be the person who has to deal with that entity that somebody else invites because they're not cautious enough or strong enough or powerful enough or yet in their power enough to actually deal with that entity on their own. So it becomes the responsibility of those that are stronger. And sometimes, especially if you're doing a ritual with a lot of people, there's a lot of energy anyway. And as a strong practitioner, you don't want to have to try to balance all of those energies. In this conversation, he's talking about having to exchange a life in order to do these practices, and that is not at all an indigenous practice. That is not something an indigenous person or a shaman would ever do. It is against the very foundation and core of shamanic principles to do something like that. That is bad magician magic. That is ancient Pika tricks, bad magician magic. That's Illuminati magic. That's when people that have no power, that are hungry for more than what they're given, more than their path, sign on, receive money, fame, and power in exchange for a life. That's bad magic. That is not shamanic at all. Now, the things that they did talk about is that being able to astrally project and help people in battle, things like this, that is true. I have been to many places and spaces to help wounded soldiers, wounded people. I don't know if they see me the same way that I see them. I've gone and put up protective circles around battlefields. I have gone and projected light in battlefields before. I have gone to try to keep people safe. Most of the time, that's been what my soul does. It goes and it protects, it saves, it heals, it helps, it brings back to life, it guides. That's what I've done in much of my astral journeying, and it's never intentional. A lot of times I'll be in a meditative state and my soul will go to that place and space, and that's my instinct, is to heal, protect, and help. So that's what I do when I'm there. Again, I have no way of knowing if this is something that others can perceive. I don't know if they can see me as well, but I've been to many different places like that. And for me, it's seconds that I can do a lot of different workings to help. I've also been present when people are going into dangerous situations, almost like I'm there with them as they're entering into the danger and helping guide them through it. This is all things that you can do when you have these abilities, but it's never something that you usually share because, again, an example is I shared it with a person who pretended to be a lot like me. She observed me for years. We were neighbors, and she kind of latched on to who I was as a person and tried to be me, which she admitted to trying, wanting to be me. And I ended up sharing some of my practices with her, which made her jealous and then caused a lot of chaos. So that's why with sheikhs, they tell you not to share your spiritual experiences with others because it makes people jealous, which these kids who were doing this documentary for a man also brought that up, that there was jealousies and people were using these things against each other. Like I had a whole bunch of people gang up on me to try to take my power, but you can't. You can hold me down for so long, but when I finally rise, everybody involved will regret it. And they did. They regretted it very much. But this is what the difference between connection to spirit or the universe or God or goddess or great spirit. This is the difference between that and utilizing spirits that are trapped in the liminal. I would never use a spirit trapped in the liminal. I set them all free in fall of 2020. Everything that was tethered to something, a space and a place, an item, a magical tool, a cave, an object, a tomb, a body, a being, a bust, anything like that has now been untethered so that all beings are set free, because this time period was supposed to be one of great evolution, but instead it's revelations. And it's revelations because all of the people who were supposed to be representations of spirit and representations of bringing that change ended up just becoming ego-driven and prideful, and doing away and leaving behind the very people that they needed to propel us into evolution. So they, in doing so, tethered their souls to this earth for eternity, because instead of doing what they were meant to do in this time period, they signed on yet again with something that is against soul, it's against spirit. It's unnatural to devise ego and power and status and do so without caring about what it's propelling the world into, in this case, war. World War III. It has been the goal of many people alive for the past 4 years to try to prevent World War III from happening. Both those that are in logical placements, such as people in armed forces or in power in countries, and then also those of us that are governing spirit. That has been the main focus for all of us. So for those of you that were caught up in your ego, your status, your power, your control, you actually propelled us into the potential for World War III. And if we see it, it is in great thanks to those people. It's not, what happens is that is the overshadow that occurs to keep those that are asleep spiritually distracted from what's happening, so that when it does happen, everyone is surprised and caught off guard, instead of actually paying attention to it while it's arising, so that we could have all actually seen what was happening and listened to the right people instead of following the wrong ones. It's a great awakening, but with the wrong message. And the wrong people sharing the message, because they are too tied to their ego, their power, their fame, their fortune, and their desire to be seen as on top, instead of understanding what needed to happen. So, instead of having that great evolution and enlightenment, we have revelations, which was actually a prophecy book that was put in place to try to prevent the making of the same mistake again, causing what I refer to as the web trap loop of hell, which means an earth that can evolve because it stays stuck in the cycle of this, getting to this place and never being able to reach beyond it, or only allowing certain people to, forgetting that everything is connected, and that each of you can't keep separately adhering to one thing and one thing and one thing and one thing, which is why the message was meant to be that we are one, logical, balanced, and not in a way that was going to be destructive to anyone. These are things that can't be undone now, but I think that people, especially like those young men who are sharing this very sacred knowledge, maybe they should have had their grandmothers who were warning them about it be the ones to communicate with that man. Maybe they should have had someone who did not fear those caves be the ones to talk about it, because the misunderstanding and misrepresentation based on fear is exactly what perpetuates the idea that it's evil in many people that have such a different view, because there's an inability to understand the connection which needed to occur. A time period where so many different cultures are being seen and shared and learned about and known, but when it comes time to actually respecting the lineage that they're coming from and respecting what the practices are for and the connection to spirit, it's lacking. It's the physical representation without spirit. That's very dangerous. And then the denying of those that have the spiritual connection, that make the physical representation. And because to many we are too mixed to identify as one thing, we end up getting rejected when we're the very people that you needed in this time period, because we wouldn't have left anyone behind, because we're mixed race. So we don't see a difference in one or the other. We see everybody as one. We don't have to agree with everything that's happened in the past, specifically those of us that are of a lineage of slave owners and slaves, which is part of my ancestry, and one of the ancestors that I worked with in this time period was the African woman. She walked with me and around me, and in my painting Beltane Reawakening in May of 2020, I ended up finishing that painting shortly before the man that I was in a 4-year relationship with crippled me by hitting me in the spine with a chair, breaking my spine and killing me. It was only after that that my ancestor showed me what had happened to her in full, and that I had a good understanding of why she chose to work with me during that time period. Now, when you have that lineage within you, it's very easy to reject the side that was clearly evil in that situation. But it's also something that you have to make peace with, knowing that that one person's poison isn't the only lineage running through your body. So in this instance, it was a Spanish man and an African woman. It doesn't mean that I need to renounce my Spanish heritage that goes back. It means that I need to make peace with the fact that what our ancestors have done, we are not. As a mixed race and indigenous woman, I had many messages for the world, and I shared them the only way that I knew how, which was via social media. I tried to heal as best I could without talking too much about it, just trying to be in my healing space and place and positive, and trying to stay inspiring, as many people do that go through hell and then end up being positive. You know, no one in my life knew very much about me. But I've been through a lot, and I never shared it. What I share now is to keep young women from going through what I have, to enlighten a lot of people, and at times it was for my own protection, or because I needed the help that I was finally asking for. Because in my life, I've been in a lot of situations where I could have used help, but I chose not to ask, because I was really independent and I knew I could deal with it on my own. Being crippled has changed what I'm able to do. And that's why I needed help. If systems were honorable, I wouldn't have needed help. If I had people to help me, I wouldn't have needed help. If I didn't have a crippling disability because of being hit in the spine with a chair, I wouldn't have needed help. I would have been fine like I always was in the past, no matter what I went through. In watching that video, it makes me so frustrated, because all of the strides that have been made to actually educate people properly on things like shamanic practices, so that there's less fear revolved around it to people who are strict religious. It's an undoing of all of the trust that can happen. And then that misinformation can cause somebody who is taught to fear those very practices. It can cause them to be fearful of somebody who does not hold evil in them, but enlightenment and good intention, and then cause a dismantling of all of the foundation of trust that could have occurred, which is what needed to happen now. Truth to be revealed, so we could have built foundations of trust upon which the world could have someday known peace. but instead were propelled into revelations yet again because people forgot to heed the warnings and ignored them. They got caught up in the web trap and the smoke show and didn't care. I just hope it's not too late now.